Oh, fantastic. So we're better than a lawyer. You're a researcher.
Greetings from the most corrupt county in the United States, Nye County. I am Anthony Greco, and this is my program, Fighting Corruption. Before we get into our guest, yesterday was September 11th, and one of the reasons why I do this show is I lost 14 people that day. One of them was Lieutenant Paul Martini of the Brooklyn Firefighters. And Paul was 35 years old, and this year he would have been 50. And a little story about Paul and how we got this story was, and I'll tell you at the end, well, they went up into the towers between the 70th and 80th floors and brought people down. And then after they got back and got those people out, him and his crew went back up between the 70th and 80th floor to bring more people down. And what happened was, the third trip they were going to make, the reason why we know this story is he told the two rookies that were on his engine he wanted them to stay with the truck. And what happened is, while they stood with the truck, they watched the rest of the crew write their social security numbers on their arms and legs with magic markers, just in case they didn't make it out of the building, that their bodies could be identified. And that's exactly what happened. So at the funeral of Paul Martini, these two guys told that story. And this is the reason why I fight government corruption. Because people like Paul deserve better people in our government. And I will continue doing this as long as I can. So I want to get into the show. Last week we gave a lot of information. My guest, Gary Walters, gave a ton of information. It was a little fast running, but that was just to lay out what was going to happen. And now we're going to get into individuals in our government, and we're talking about state government, we're talking about county government, we're talking about attorney generals, we're talking about judges locally and across the state. We're talking about a governor. We're talking about a lot of people who are involved in this corrupt criminal enterprise, which Gary calls a fourth level of government, which I call the shadow government. But this is a corrupt criminal enterprise, and when we get done after weeks of doing this show, we're going to be able to figure out who set this shadow corrupt criminal government up, and who set up this shadow government. So I'm not going to waste any more time. I want to get directly to Gary, and I also have another person, Gerald, who's here, who has helped hundreds and hundreds of people in Nye County to try to get a fair shake in this corrupt justice system that we have here. And they passed a law 2 years ago to stop paralegals from helping people without attorneys. And actually, Kimberly Wonka mentioned Gerald's name in a newspaper article because she knows how much he has helped this community. And our judges and our prosecutors don't want to help the people of the community. They want to use the people of this community as fuel for their fire, as a log to be thrown on a fire, and we mean nothing to them but to get convictions, to promote themselves, to get more and more money thrown into the system, to keep their corrupt criminal enterprise stocked with our taxpayer cash. So, without any further ado, here's Gary and Gerald.
Thank you, Anthony. Good evening, folks. I want to, last week I told you that we would talk about presumption law versus the knowledge of law. And before I get into that, I've done some research and due diligence and been involved in a case of a Christopher James Willing, and the appeals court number is 68953. I'd like to read you the order of affirmance of his submitted habeas corpus and the denial of his complaint against the NRS statutes, and the way in which Judge Kimberly Wanker caused whether she did it deliberately or not, she certainly was careless and reckless. And what she did to cause the appellate court to make severe errors and place this man, like many others, in great peril, because what has happened in many of these filings that are going on now in the different counties by certain inmates that are seeking justice and to have their cases overturned or resolved, they are using what Judge Kimberly Wanker and her denial of Christopher Willing's writ of habeas corpus on the issues of the unconstitutional and invalid statutes. First, when I start to read this to you, what I want to get across to you, Anthony, and to your listeners is this. We went to the creation and the inception of the Nevada Revised Statute and how it was created and how its inception involved. And we went in to look at how they repealed, back in May of 1951, all of the statutes of Nevada. Now, when you repeal a statute, I don't care who you are, walking, living, breathing, or passed away, or from the heavens fallen, you can never revive that statute. It is gone forever. Wouldn't you agree with that, Gerald?
Yes.
All right, so now, I want to read to you, I'd like to read to you this order of affirmance.
Okay.
And it's very important that the listeners understand it, and so I'm going to kind of dissect it, take it apart, and they will really get a fix on how corrupt this is. It starts off that this appeal is from an order of the district court denying a post-conviction petition for a writ of habeas corpus from the 5th Judicial District Court of Nye County, Kimberly A. Wanker, Judge.
Excuse me. The habeas corpus is a appeal handled by inmates when their lawyer leaves them after direct appeal, and the direct appeal has either failed or has not been submitted by their lawyer. Just so you're obvious.
Thank you, Gerald. I appreciate that. Appellate Christopher James Willing argues that the district court erred by denying his May 22nd, 2015 petition. Incidentally, this is still ongoing.
Okay.
Willing argues that all Nevada revised statutes used to convict him are void due to the failure to contain the enactment clause. Now, I want to stop right there. That is not what Christopher Willing argued. Christopher Willing argued that the joint concurrent resolution, number 1 and number 2, that was used to repeal all the statutes of Nevada and was used to create the Nevada revised statute did not contain the enactment language on its face, and therefore it was void ab initio, period. Now, the Nevada Constitution, Article 4, Section 23, is very clear, and it mandates and commands, and is the paramount law, right, Gerald?
Yes.
And it states very clearly that, and we have an Attorney General opinion, 85, that says that without, even if this was passed by both houses, this joint concurrent resolution, even passed by both houses, if it did not contain the enactment language, it was void and could not be cited as the laws of Nevada.
And it can never come back.
But that ain't what they're saying here. This is not what Kimberly Wanker told the appellate court to cause this, not only this, but she has now caused hundreds, of these filers to be devastated by her outlandish misrepresentations. We'll go on to say this. She says that Willing's argument lacks merit. And this is what she calls the appellate court mistake. Judge Gibbons, Teo, and Silver of the newly established appellate court. The statutes of Nevada contain the laws with the enacting clauses required by the Nevada Constitution. We're not arguing that at all. And that was never Willing's argument. That was Kimberly Wanker telling the appellate court and making them think that's what Willing's argument was. That is false.
So she's making false statements in writing.
That is a fraudulent statement. And the Nevada Revised Statutes are the official codified version of the Statutes of Nevada. First of all, David Dudley Field was the inventor of codification and codes in the late 1800s in California. And he did it for two reasons. One was to find the law easy, and two was to stop judges from like this from making their own bench laws and rulings. That's what codification means, or codified.
Thank you.
And then they say CNRS 22173, which was written by the Legislative Council, which is part of that fourth level of government we're talking about. It's not even coming from the legislature, who's supposed to write the laws. The Nevada Revised Statutes, now watch this, folks. This is the appellate court, the newly established appellate court talking this. Reproduce the laws of Nevada's compiled. How can you reproduce a law if it's been repealed? Right, Gerald? Do you agree with that? There's no way you could revise that or reproduce it. But that's not what they're saying. They said they reproduced the laws of Nevada as compiled and organized and revised by guess who? The Legislative Council. Now, when we're talking about the legislative, therefore they denied it and said that they submitted the decision without oral argument, which means they wouldn't even let the man come and present any of the proper evidence, because they had the evidence, the irrefutable evidence, and the facts. Okay? And they argued that. Now, you go back to May 1st, 1951, and you look at how they created the Statute Revision Commission. You got the Legislative Council Bureau, which is another one of the hats. The original Legislative Council lawyer, Russell McDonald, wore that hat. He wore the hat of the Legislative Council Bureau, and then he wore the hat of the Director of the Statute Revision Commission. This guy wore lots of hats.
And who appointed this guy?
Well, basically, by his own design, he mesmerized everybody and with his St. Bernard eyes, and he controlled all these corrupted officials. So what happened was the Legislative Council Bureau claims that it was the Nevada Supreme Court in May of 1951 that created the Statute Revision Commission. But then the legislature under the bill, Gerald, under Bill 182, claims they did, and they put these three justices on it. Any way you go about it, Gerald, don't you agree they crossed the border of the separation of powers doctrine and violated it?
Any act, any A-N-Y act that is not judicial in nature, appointed position.
So when you go and you look at Article 3, Section 1 of the separation of powers doctrine, and then you specifically go to Article 6, Section 11, it says that these justices and judges cannot perform any function. Call it quasi-legislative, quasi-executive. They can't perform any function except that appertaining to what that's by which what they were elected to do. So we have a very serious problem here. But then you go on and you review the justices of the Ninth Circuit and their opinions, Justice Harley. You look at all the Supreme Courts and stuff, and you realize we have decades of stealth fraud. We have ongoing long-arm fraud, because what affects the inmate in prison today was what they did back starting in May 1951. Now,
it's never been ratified by the people.
You're exactly right. They can produce no documents showing any ballots of the yeas and the nays and any were taken by the citizens.
Just move your microphone closer, Gerald, because I want people to hear what you say.
All inmates have to do is file a little mandamus with the Supreme Court of the United States or the Supreme Court of Nevada first. And enlighten the court as to what's going on. Because it's never been ratified by the people of the citizens of Nevada, and they cannot prove that in the, by design and by constitutional agreement. These laws and statutes do not apply to the whole code.
So that means people are being held in jail, have been convicted, have been coerced into taking a plea deal on false and invalid laws.
Yes, and the thing is that when you have a known, unlawful, and unconstitutionally failed law, the court lacks subject matter jurisdiction to ever proceed in the crime vanishes. Now, I don't condone people that have done
Horrible crimes, right?
We have to have a fair and just system, and we have to have crime and punishment balance. The fact that you could afford a better lawyer than me, or the fact that he lived down the street from the judge and they all eat and hang out together and they're good old boys, that is a bunch of crap, and that needs to stop. The guy that is indigent and can't afford an attorney should have the same rights as a person who has millions of dollars in the bank, or one of these politicians that scammed everybody and split. And I know you people know who I'm talking about out here, because there's a lot of thieving going on still to this day, and it's just horrific. And the things that I found out about Pahrump, it just literally scares me to death that this kind of thing's going on in the United States. But finally, you know, people get enough of enough. And you take the ordinary person. We have to educate our citizens on a 4th or 5th grade level of education.
Correct.
And we have to look at the fact that our prisons are warehouses full of ignorance. They consist of mental retardation and a lot of drug problems, people that are drug addicts. They're not being addressed. And then ultimately they're being put back out on the street.
Also, the population of the state and the county of Nye need to pay attention and go to the courthouse and sit through an hour or two every month of court proceedings. They would be totally shocked. Instead of doing that, they go to various little functions and go to casinos, things like that, and they should take an interest in the laws that runs their life. That's what I tell them to do. Don't go to the party, go down to the courthouse and sit there. It's an open court. Anybody can go there and sit in any case unless it's a child case on which the court is closed. They should do that, because then they would get educated, and that's what this town needs, is education.
And let me say this. I don't know Judge Kimberly Winker personally. I want to tell you, I don't care to know her. I don't care if I ever see her, ever meet her in my life. Because what she's done is nothing more than being a tyrant attorney and usurping and perjury of her own oath of office under her own oath of
She
swearing.
got sanctioned by the Nevada Judicial Commission, and there's a bunch more that's coming along the pipe, also witnesses.
Yeah, she needs to be impeached.
Well, yes, and the impeachment process needs, but you see, the Nevada Ethics Judicial Commission should do their job and look at these documents and look at what she has now falsified and filed, and it is grounds for her to be removed from the bench.
Now, how could we get to the people who are going to have cases in front of her now that should not? How do we get them to put their cases on hold so we can get her out of here?
Well, you've got to get the Nevada Ethics Judicial Commission to do the job. And they've got to start showing more respect, not only for the citizens, because listen, if we don't get a handle on these judges and the tyrants and the attorney and usurpation and the stuff that they're doing, if we don't get a handle on these people, your friends, your neighbors, your relatives, everybody's going to come passing before them one time or another. They're going to be in jail or prison or fined.
And that's the problem here. Nobody pays attention until one of their kids or brothers or sisters gets pinched and gets put into this horrible system. Nobody's paying attention.
If I had my brothers, I'd have everybody in Nye County arrested and put through the whole system for 4 weeks, then let them go, expunge their record, and say, has anything changed? The politicians and other law officials hanging from other trees in the state, I can promise you that.
Well, you know, Gerald, what amazes me, there's a a lot of politicians have come out of prison and been reelected again across the country, and I have some literature on that, and I can name all of from Marion Barry to you name it. So. But the bottom line here is, folks, you live in a great town. There's a lot of great people here. There's a lot of hard-working people, and you could find yourself caught up by some corrupt detectives who starts the process, goes to the DA, who, listen, it's okay if they do proper justice, and people commit a crime, they need to be punished. But let me give you an example. Guy goes in a Walmart, he steals a Eureka vacuum cleaner. He comes out with it. Now, they get the vacuum cleaner back, but he gets 25 years in prison. It gets worse than a murder case. Why? Because he didn't have proper representation. He couldn't have an attorney.
And they bring him up on crazy charges. It's shoplifting,
well,
not burglary.
That is shoplifting, and yet they call it burglary. And when the doors open from 9 to whatever, and the public is invited in, that's not burglary. I don't know whoever invented that crime. It goes all the way back to Russell W. McDonald and those three justices, Bant, Easter, and Merrill. And every time they would pass a bill, they would up their salaries over and above what they're already getting. So it's pretty shocking what is actually going on in this county. But what Judge Kimberly Wanker has done, it's irreparable. It is damaging. It has placed a lot of people in great peril because she has literally misrepresented to the newly formed and approved appellate court to catch these kind of things, deal with these kind of issues, and straighten them out, and make sure they're not felonious and everything else, or frivolous, before it gets to the Nevada Supreme Court. That's not what she's done here.
She was appointed by the governor, and as a personal favor, I believe, and consequently, she says she reads everything before she brings it to court.
That's not true.
And she doesn't do that.
I challenge her, and I challenge her in any court of law, and I challenge her before the Ethics Judicial Commission, and I would love to debate her.
She's more abusive in her courtroom than Lane would ever be. She tells people, shut up, I have a gun, and I'll use it. She says that on the bench.
Well, you know what? Those kinds of threats can also get her in federal trouble. You understand? If the right kind of people want to press the issue. And actually, I think Kimberly Wanker needs a true bill issued against her, so does Judge Lane. They both need true bills. You know what a true bill is? It's a form of indictment. Okay, and that's what needs to be here. There needs to be a review panel, bring these judges up like a grand jury, and bring them before them and say, hey, did you not make these statements to the appellate court that caused them to err this way?
Yeah, she's been sanctioned on a Robert Carson case that from back in 2012 that just came up, and everybody thinks she's so great. Oh, let me tell you something. She is violating people. She's having them wanted, patted down just to get into her courtroom. She turns around and locks the door when people are in there. If people a couple minutes late, they're afraid that she's going to put them in jail because they didn't show up. I'm telling you, she's a tyrant.
No, it's time for her to go. Let me tell you something. If you could take a judge like Halverson and just have her bailiff rub her feet and they removed her from the bench. This lady right here, what she just did to the appellate court and absolutely misrepresented the truth, it's time to go.
And how do you get people to pay attention?
Well, you give her an alternative, and it's going to take the people to give her that alternative, is that I think you should willingly resign. If you don't want to resign, then we have two other options. Nevada Ethics Judicial Commission, which means if we do file against you, we no longer can discuss the issue because under their confidentiality and bringing in the FBI and all that other stuff in the investigation, you can't talk about it. Then the other one is the citizens get together and they get about 1,500 names together and they start the impeachment process. And they throw her out.
You could do an impeachment process with only 1,500 names and not like...
I think it's less than that, isn't it, Jerry? Is it more than
That's a recall, though, where you got to get, like, a certain percentage of the vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that can be achieved if these listeners would all get their friends and their relatives together and say, you know what, this is enough is enough. And I'm sitting here today, and I've got all the evidence, all the documents for any citizen who wants to write you, email you. We're going to put this stuff up in PDF files. But let me tell you something that's real challenging. I have in my car green certified return receipt request from the post office. Sent to the Attorney General at that time was Kathleen Cortez Masto.
Oh, another nightmare.
I've got some information here on her if we ever have the time to get into it, it'd be shocking. And on Harry Reid, too, that we found out what he did in 1971 when he was President of the Senate, and how he bogusly passed these enhancement laws and habitual criminal laws without ever having the right vote of the people or the right of the Senate and the legislature to do it. He did it on a conference. It's called the Committee of Conference. With him and Foley. They did a bunch of stuff. But we'll get into that later if we can.
Okay.
I want to stay on this subject matter of Wanker. What Wanker did is a horrifying thing because now the appellate court and the DAs and all the other counties are picking up on this. And when they file in opposition to shoot down these habeas corpuses and all, they're using Judge Wanker's argument and what the appellate court said. But the appellate court is wrong, and very wrong, and those judges need to check themselves and go back and question her, or they need to resign or be impeached themselves too.
See, now, we have a Seventh Amendment task force here that we're starting. People are starting. I just know about it. And they would like you to come to a meeting to explain this to numerous people so they can ask questions, and I would love you to draw that whole organizational chart that you did for me that day.
This is going to get you about what Governor Sandoval did. His Band-Aid fixes, seeing all these documents coming down the pipe, he passed into law January this year that inmates, prisoners, will no longer have access to public government records, just like he did to paralegals. Now that's their Band-Aid fix, but he doesn't realize all those documents are now gathered, and the whole pieces of the puzzle. So, you know, you can have one missing piece of the puzzle is ugly, but guess what? We got all the pieces. And the puzzle's beautiful, but it's showing the ugliness of justice. And I'm here to tell you...
Or lack of justice.
99.999% of all these judges need to go, be fined, or put in jail. All your DAs in all these counties, they need to run for cover. Let me give you an example. Steve Wilson, the DA of Clark County. His wife is Judge Jackie Glass.
No.
Now, Judge Jackie Glass is the one that tried O.J. Simpson. But they can't say that they didn't know about these NRSs being illegal and unconstitutional and void. They can't say that they had a fiduciary responsibility to make O.J. Simpson known of this, but they hid it. They hid the stealth fraud, and they hid the long-arm fraud. And when you do that, you become an accessory to the fraud, before or after the fact. The bottom line is, pardon me?
And they all took an oath.
And they took an oath of office under the painful penalty of perjury, which is 4 years in the state penitentiary jail and a $5,000 fine.
For every time they do it?
That's right. So if we're to presume, operating on the presumption of law, that the NRSs are valid, it's their own NRSs that can put them in jail or cause them to resign. And we have that all documented, and we put it in the form of a warning, and we have sent it to several judges, like Judge Delaney, Alani, all these Clark County judges, and they just discard it and say, oh, I'm in power, you know.
Yeah, I belong to the club. They're not going to do anything to me.
I'm in the club. Well, you know what? The club is about to change. You know what I'm saying?
Several of them have resigned.
Several are resigning. Let me give you an example. The former DA of Clark County, David Rogers. David Rogers was forced to resign, but then he was allowed to come out and say, well, I had a new baby, so I want to spend more time with it, so that's why I have resigned my position as the Clark County District Attorney. And then he goes right back over 2 days later and becomes the lawyer for the police association. Now, what is that? Well, you're facing a Class C felony. And the feds done told you you have to take one. So now you've got the most powerful lawyer in the state, which is the Attorney General. And above him, you have the U.S. Attorney named Daniel Bogdan. Now, Daniel Bogdan is somewhat of a good guy, but he can be flip-flopped. You know what I mean? And he doesn't do anything. But he will come after you if you got big pockets and he can make a big case. Used to be Greco Dam underneath him, and Greco Dam left. Actually, that's I think. I was told that. And then he's been replaced by his up-and-coming protege named Burns. and they're prosecuting some real heavy guys in this town. Money laundering, casino stuff, and thefts, and, you know, name it, you name it. Blah. But they don't want to mention the casinos because that's big business in the state.
Right.
They don't want to mention the casino owners, how corrupt they are. That's big business in the state. You know what I'm saying? So we won't get into all that because, you know, folks, the mafia never left. Let me tell you what happened.
They just changed suits.
They put on suits and went inside government and got educated.
There you go.
But they are still here. They are very corrupt, and they are extremely dangerous. And you know what? I don't fear for my life. I'm having a good time because I'm exposing the corruption. And
they hate this. This federal court, they don't know these people. I have a feeling a lot of people are going to get rewarded by some of the casinos that
All right, we're going to take a break. Hold that thought. If anybody wants to call when we come back, 775-419-2344.
All statements
you know, Anthony, I got a
program
solution.
host, co-host, yes, and
What do you think of this, Gary?